Good evening, folks. This is Deb Delapiana, and this is probably a couple of short takes. This morning, I did a video about Joe Biden's State of the Union address, where he, put to rest any doubt about who was running the country. And he blew the old man narrative out of the water. And I'm sorry, folks, but I didn't see any indication that there was any degeneration in his thought process whatsoever. He knows exactly what the issues are in this country. He's got a handle on them, and he's doing his job. And he's done one heck of a job in the climate that he walked into. But tonight, we're going to talk about the new rising star in the Republican Party, Britt, who was hand-selected by the GOP to give the rebuttal to Joe Biden's State of the Union address. And why I'm saying this is going to take a couple of videos is because, unlike Britt, I get facts. We're going to talk about some of the shit she said, and I'm going to refute it. But let's talk about just the overall ambiance of her video, okay? The fact that she was sitting in her kitchen, I'm sure there was a reason for doing that, but this is 2024, not 1955. And women can be wives and mothers and actually function outside of the home. They can have jobs. They can become politicians like Britt. And they can vote. And the women of this nation know they're going to be voting in November. So let's start. I'm going to start, and we're going to be very methodical about this. Now, Britt says that Joe Biden's out of touch, and she really wished he understood what people discuss around their kitchen table, what those real issues are. Well, honestly, Katie, I actually think Joe Biden has a perfect handle on this, because Joe Biden has done a lot for the American family. Now, it started with the American Rescue Plan. And in that plan, for the first time in ever, Medicare can now negotiate drug prices with pharmaceutical companies. And for the elderly, he lowered the cost of prescription insulin to $35. And he stated in the State of the Union address that he intends to do that if he's reelected for all Americans. So he gets it. And I'd like to mention, of course, that the American Rescue Plan was voted against by the GOP. All right? He has also recently put together a strike force that's going to be run by the DOJ and the Federal Trade Commission to go after unfair pricing and illegal price gouging. And he has vowed that the laws will be enforced. So for anyone who thinks that, Joe Biden doesn't understand that food prices are high and the price of other goods are high right now, he actually does. And he is doing something to change that issue. But in the meantime, let me just say this. Joe Biden is presiding over literally one of the best economies for any president in history. Lowest unemployment rate in 50 years. We did not have the predicted recession that we probably should have had after COVID-19. We did not have that. And we are one of the only countries that can say that. Other countries are struggling far more than the United States. And the other thing he's doing is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which, by the way, the GOP would like to see dissolved because it doesn't help their donors much. The Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is now putting together a rule that will stop banks and credit card companies from charging outrageous late fees. So late fees will go from $31 down to $8. That might not sound like a lot to rich people, but it is to people like me. And let me just say this. I'm 70 years old, living on my Social Security, and I have a part-time job at a hardware store. I have to tell you, I am so much better off now than I was in 2020 that it isn't funny. So when she says that Joe Biden's out of touch, she's full of shit, because Joe Biden has been doing what we call growing the economy from the bottom up and the middle out, so that it helps the most those people who are in the middle class and the poor. No more trickle-down economics, okay? That's the GOP's gig. The GOP's gig is, hey, let's give all these billionaires a tax break, and guess what? All that wealth will trickle down to the poor people. Well, you know what? We've been waiting for that since Ronald Reagan. That shit just doesn't work, okay? I think we've given that one long enough. But I'm going to tell you right now, the Republicans get reelected, they're going to cut your Social Security and Medicare, and they are going to make the tax cuts to billionaires permanent, because that was something that was on their bucket list when they won the House. Now, the left has coddled criminals and defunded the police. Okay, first of all, the Democrats never defunded the police. That was a left-wing slogan that was put together after the shooting and the killing of George Floyd. People were pissed off. Some of us still are. And we actually do think that the police should not be the first line of call when there is a mental health issue. They should be the backup. But nobody's defunded the police. In fact, the American Rescue Plan, which I've already mentioned once, provided $350 million for more police. And again, the GOP voted against the American Rescue Plan. Typically in blue states, they spend more money on policing than they do in red states. And the murder rates in red states are far higher than they are in the blue states, no matter what the GOP is telling you. Okay? So even if you take out the biggest red states from the statistics, if you remove all the statistics from the biggest red states, the death, the shooting and the killing statistics, the murder rates for the biggest red states, if you take them out of the equation, the murder rates are still 12% higher in red states than they are in blue states. So the whole notion that we've defunded the police and we coddle criminals and we don't police in blue states is bullshit, okay? That's absolute bullshit. And by the way, one other thing. Are we taking into account the hundreds of people who have been murdered by angry white men with AR-15s and the school children that have been killed in Parkland? Okay? In other school settings, are we taking into account any of that? Will the Republicans do anything about getting those guns off the streets? No, they won't do anything about that. This shit will continue. The Sandy Hooks, the Columbines, the Parklands, all of this shit will continue, okay? And if it's not a school setting, maybe it's the Pulse nightclub shooting, the shooting at synagogues, people that are killed every day by angry white men with automatic weapons or semi-automatic weapons. Let's not quibble here. Both of them need to come off the streets. But we don't ever discuss that. Instead, we want to discuss the immigrant problem. And I'm going to get back to that on the second video, so hang on. Okay, so we're back. So let's talk about this. Let's go to the Marjorie Taylor Greene snippet in your mind, okay? Because we all saw it last night, where she interrupted Joe Biden during his speech to raise an issue about the one murder that came from one immigrant, one illegal immigrant. Now, is it a horrible thing? It absolutely is. But what difference is it if it's an illegal immigrant or a white American? There is no difference, folks, okay? And there aren't murderous immigrants coming over the border with guns and ready to kill, the American citizens. We already did that when we came to this country. We took care of the actual real Americans that were living here, okay, without any remorse whatsoever. So let's get off that kick. But let's talk about, let me go back again to the weapons things and the school shootings. And the shootings over inane things like every time Donald Trump, tells people that they have to get out and fight because we're not going to have a nation left. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about those killings because those are very real, okay? But if we're going to go to the safety at the border issue, that's on the GOP. Because you know what? We had a bill. We had a bill that was negotiated over a period of months by the Senate, the GOP side and the Democrat side. And they came up with a bill. And you know what? Donald Trump told the House, because he's actually running the show there, the real Speaker of the House is the Orange Jackaloon. He told them he didn't want them to deal with immigration because that would help Joe Biden win the election, and he wants to be the one to do it. So he wants to do his mass deportation and incarceration and putting people in concentration camps. That's what he wants. That's not what we want. And the people at the border pretty much told Donald Trump he wasn't welcome, I might add. But if we want to talk, Katie Britt, about securing our border, you had the chance to do that. You had a bill where the Democrats gave up far more than they ever would have given up had it been a complete Democratic bill. And guess what happened? The House said no. And even though the Senate passed it at first, the cowardly Senate, when they knew the House was going to block the bill, decided to vote against it too so they wouldn't, make Donald too upset. So please, folks, just stop with the whole border routine. It just doesn't work anymore. So then let's talk about Katie Britt's assertion that we have fewer freedoms than we used to. You are damn right. You have stacked the Supreme Court to take a woman's control of her own body away. You are making it the government's job to tell women they cannot get an abortion when they need it. And you have created horror stories that the mainstream media isn't even covering. They could care less about covering any of that. They'd rather listen to Donald Trump slur his words, marauding across the nation, spewing bullshit, lying to the American people and insulting their intelligence, all the while he's saying that Joe Biden is Sleepy Joe when he can't even form a fucking sentence. So Katie Britt tells the story about how she spoke to a woman who, hold on, let me get my notes here. She has spoken to a woman who was sex trafficked by the cartel starting at the age of 12 and was repeatedly raped. Nothing could be worse for a woman than sexual assault, said Katie Britt. Said the woman who supports Donald Trump, who is also now a convicted sexual assaulter with 20 other women who have credible claims of either sexual assault or harassment against him. A man who owes $83.3 million to the woman he sexually assaulted because he also defamed her twice on social media. We're talking about that. The Republicans are actually talking about that as if they have any respect for women. We have a governor who is going to run in North Carolina who says he dreams of the day when women don't have the vote anymore. Are you listening, ladies? At all? This is their vision for women. And yet they supposedly care about women, just like they care about families. And that's why, said Katie Britt, that we support a nationwide IVF. Is that right? Well, Tammy Duckworth and Patty Murray of the Democratic Party put up a bill just a week ago to make IVF safe all across the nation. It was promptly blocked by Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of, wait for it, Mississippi. Because Katie Britt's from Alabama. And don't get me started about the people below the Mason-Dixon line, okay? Do not. Don't make me go there. Senator Cindy Hyde-Smith of Mississippi blocked that bill, and her excuse was it could result in human-animal chimeras. I really hate, do you know what those are at all, people? Okay. Those are organisms with human blood, neurons, germ cells, and other tissues. They have been generated for decades for medical research, so this isn't anything new, okay? And they're created because they facilitate strategies to fight disease, okay? They're used in biological studies. But IVF isn't used to create mutant human beings in a laboratory. So that's a pretty poor excuse, and I'm pretty sure that's not the reason why they blocked that. But let me just make one other point here. The whole reason this whole IVF shit came up is because they overturned Roe v. Wade. So now apparently an egg that you can freeze is a human being, but you can't really freeze a human being. So that just kills that theory. You know, we're getting rid of women's rights here, one zygote at a time. So let's make one thing clear to Katie Britt. Yes, we are now less free than we were. We have the Republican Party banning books in schools, banning the biography of Roberto Clemente, the story of Rosa Parks. You got to be kidding me. They are literally trying to wipe out transgender people. They're trying to make them illegal. The state of Oklahoma has totally banned gender-affirming care for youth, and they tried to do it for adults, and it didn't go over so well. And every time they do this to people, they harm people. And when they talk about parental rights, when you interfere in something like this, you are taking away the parent's right to make sure that her child or their children are taken care of in the manner in which they need to be taken care of. You people who have no experience with any of this and no right to be involved in people's personal lives. You keep talking about small government, but you know what? You want to exist in their bedrooms. It is none of the government's business what people do with their bodies, period. They need to be taking care of the needs of the people on the whole, but not getting involved in people's personal decisions. So while I'm sure that somewhere on the horizon, Katie Britt may be a rising star, last night, she looked like something out of fucking Gone with the Wind to me. You know, when I saw Marjorie Taylor Greene stand up and start her babbling, all I could hear in the back of my head was the theme from Deliverance. When Katie Britt started talking, all I could hear was the theme from, Gone with the Wind. Now, I woke up this morning to the headline that Katie Britt's response to the State of the Union was one of the Republican Party's worst disasters, and the Republican Party was saying that themselves. But I'm absolutely positively sure they knew exactly what Katie Britt was going to say, unless they're that stupid. And I am sure someone wrote that speech, and I am sure someone staged that to come from her kitchen. So if this was one of their biggest disasters, it's on them. But instead, what did they do? They turned around and shot the messenger. And that's basically all I've got to say tonight. The Republican Party is full of shit. Now, you know what? We have one task here between, now and November. And that's to get as many people as we can to the polls and send the GOP and Donald Trump to the dustbin of American history, where they never, never should rise again. I'll talk to you all later.